Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. John Kelly, Profiler here, and welcome. Welcome to part 25 of our very sad series, Who Killed Libby German and Abby Williams? I really appreciate you tuning in, and today I really appreciate that I'm being joined by two of my team members, Dr. Edward Mirsky, who's a pure psychologist. He is a PsyD, a doctor of psychology. And I'm also have the honor of being joined by my partner, uh, Frank Adamson, commander of the Green River Task Force back in the day, who is now retired. And, we want to go over a few things today based on what we've seen on various videos, but one video specifically I'm concerned about that Harvey Carroll did on a first responder. All righty, so Dr. Mirsky and Frank, thank you so much for being here today, and we're really honored to have you. And as you know, we've all been invested in this case for a while now, and we're trying to get a feel for what's going on here. The one thing I want to bring out to you guys is the FBI. Since I've been involved, in the field of forensics, and kind of since we've been out there hunting serial killers. The FBI has always talked about power and control, the power and control. Um, and the one thing from all my research over the years and the cases we've been involved in, I focus in on, okay, power and control, but sex too. I mean, there's always a sexual component, pretty much with most subtypes of serial killers. And that's something we're aware of. There's only maybe a couple subtypes, maybe a little more than a couple, maybe three, possibly four, that there is no sexual connection. So, my focus is, the superintendent Carter talked about, at his presser, knowing that this perpetrator is interested in power. He brought that out at that presser. Power, he talked about. So I listened to that and I understand that. I believe the guy is interested in power. I feel he walks around feeling inferior at times and feeling powerless at times. What it's missing for me is the sexual component, because I really believe that it's not only about power and control, but it's about power and sexual dominance. Eddie, what do you have to say about that? Let's start with you. I mean, you're the doctor of psychology, you're the doctor in the house. So let's start with you.
Okay. Well, going back, many years when, let's say, Sigmund Freud was in his heyday, back in the early part of the century, did um, emphasize two main motivations that all people have are sex and aggression. Um, and that was a theme throughout all his writing. He was convinced those were the two main motivators um, that kind of dictate people's behavior. Um, and, there's just some truth to it, a lot of truth, depending on your orientation. And, it's been certainly studied and discussed for over 100 years now. There is, my opinion, there is truth to those two areas of motivation that are involved in a lot of human activities, criminal or otherwise. If you're talking about power and control, for me, they're like flip sides of the same coin. Where power and control, they're almost synonymous. I don't know if you could separate them totally. Where there's power, people have a need for power, there's a need for control, and vice versa. So, and we know throughout history, certainly there are certain people that have this almost pathological need for power or control over other people, over animals, over countries. The James Bond villains, they want control and power over the world, over the universe, right? Now, if you want to add sex into it too, yeah, sometimes sex is a motivating influence too over people's behavior. Sometimes sex is, a very important component. Maybe sometimes it's a minor component of a lot of behavior, but so in a lot of the crimes, rapes, even with Libby and Abby, how much was sex a motive there in those crimes? That's something I guess all the experts are still discussing, right? And they're not sure. But was power control? That seems very likely. But the sex, was it how much of, was there a sexual motive there? I guess that's what we're still up in the air about. No one seems to know for sure. But maybe if we do a lot more details about the crime scene, everything, that might elucidate that a little bit more. But
Frank, what do you have to say about that? This whole power, control, and sexual component to this crime.
From what I've read and what I understand of serial killings, fantasy plays a huge role. And the fantasy has the sexual component. There's no question about that. But often murderers describe their experiences being extra sensational. And so I believe that the sexual component is there even when a rape doesn't occur or something like that. So that's basically where I come from.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's hold it right there for a second. And then, looking at it, I mean, we know that usually sexual predators are obsessed with sex. And, we don't know if this was the motive or not in this case. Okay. And I'm concerned if it was the motive, because what we also know is that sexual predators usually do not stop hunting and will eventually act out and rape and kill again, depending on who they are. So that's something that's bothering me. This is 3 years old now. This case, we haven't seen anything, any acting out recently. Actually, in the last 3 years, in that particular area where we have a sexual kind of murder. There was a rape and a guy killed himself, and I'm sure they're looking at that. That did happen quite a while ago, and we looked at it too. His name escapes me right now, but I'm sure our listeners, our audience out there is very, very familiar with him. Supposedly on the crime scene that we've looked at, the crime scene that Harvey Careless put out there in his new video, CSI, he's showing a first responder posting statements on how he found the girls. Supposedly Libby, was really badly assaulted, severely cut, and supposedly, she didn't have all of her clothes on. There were clothes missing, and that speaks to me. I mean, pretty much in this video, he talks about her being nude. I mean, that pretty much speaks to me, that we have a serial predator on our hands, okay? Or not a serial predator, I'm sorry, a sexual predator on our hands. He may be serial, we don't know. We're going to get into that, okay? So that just kind of screams out at me. And Abby supposedly was fully clothed and was stabbed to death. And, so Libby was actually the target of this whole thing. And, there's a lot of talk out there, was this vengeance, on her because of her father, who supposedly ratted on some people, some drug dealers, or, was this, what we've seen so many times in the past, a sexual predator out there hunting? You know, Eddie, what do you see? We're trying to figure out going back and forth. I mean, there's the possibility of revenge, there's the possibility of a sexual assault. The one thing we know this was a robbery. Okay. So we can take the robbery motive out of it. These girls didn't have any money, they weren't there to be robbed. So that leaves us with a couple of other things. We're looking at revenge, vengeance, or sexual assault. I mean, based on that video, what say you, Dr. Mirsky?
Well, as we know, anything is possible. Um, like a revenge motive. Um, I don't recall too many cases, or really any, that where if it's revenge, that you target children, young people, to extract that revenge. I'm sure there's probably cases somewhere. Frank may be more familiar with all his years, but it just seems very unusual to target young children as the way of getting that revenge. Um, especially if it was, yeah, maybe in the drug world, maybe that's considered the most mortal sin you could commit, is to be a snitch, to rat on someone. And but I personally, I just, from all my experience in this area, I don't recall revenge on children, and especially in the way that it was committed. I mean, savage kind of brutality that occurred. Um, so I would tend to not think it's a revenge. Anything is possible, like you said. And if you want to, it could be a combination. Maybe the person did have some sexual motive too, and he said, well, I can, like the old saying, kill two birds with one stone. We can get some revenge, and maybe there's some sexual, component that's being satisfied also. That's a possibility, but just haven't seen many cases like that. That's what I'm saying.
No, we haven't. We have not. We have not. Frank, what say you about it?
Well, I think both are possibilities. I think one, that the power control may indeed be the sexual component. The other thing that I believe is that it could be staged. For example, in Green River, Ridgway claimed he staged one of the girls to mislead the police. So there can be a number of motivations why someone might want to stage a scene, and it still may have that sexual component. The reality is, in order to have a sexual component, you don't necessarily need to have a rape. Okay.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that could play here. I mean, the suspect could be impotent. the act, for whatever reason that he was trying to perpetrate, may have been interrupted. So there's a number of things that you can think about, or like I say, the murder is the sexual component.
Yeah, we've seen that. We've seen that so many times in the past. And in the video, Harvey Carroll and his team are leaning more towards staging taking place. You've seen staging with Green River. Well, I was Green River. I'm with Green River too. But you were up close and personal to the initial staging, and I got to tell you that we've not seen this in most of the cases that we've worked since we've been together, because usually it's pretty much what it seems to be. Of course, we were privy to more information from the crime scenes and everything else in the other cases we've worked with law enforcement. But yeah, I mean, I can see exactly where you're coming from. It could be staged. This way, it's made look like a sexual attack, but really, it's personal. I just can't wrap my head around killing two girls, instead of one that's the target. Why have an additional murder? Why take the chance on having a witness if, say Libby was the target, Abby got away, have a witness out there running around that got away on you? Why would you do this in broad daylight? Yeah, it's out in the middle of nowhere, but there's a lot of people showing up, and maybe he didn't know that. Why not under the cover of darkness? Why not use, a pistol or something like that, quick, fast? Why not kill them at the bridge? If this was a revenge kind of thing, as soon as he came up on them, make his getaway, that's the end of it. Why, parade them all the way down across the hill and dale, across the creek to a specific spot, unless that specific spot where he killed them and dumped their bodies had major significance to him in some way. Definitely it was out of view, from the bridge. But then we hear that, the specific burial site, or where he put their bodies, was in view of somehow, somewhere. I think I heard that, from a prosecutor talking about the case, who's not on it anymore. But it's something our audience, again, would know for sure. Okay, but I can see both sides of the coin here. Okay, let's hold it right there. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the, this whole sophisticated kind of stranger on stranger murder. See if we can come up with something. Now, to me, looking at Libby, and supposedly she got the worst of it, again, based on the information we got from the video, and supposedly that is the first responder's account that she really got the worst of it. The one thing that I know from interviewing serial killers is, what really is under that rage. I mean, all these guys, we talk about the power, the control, the sexual component, but the rage, the underlying rage that causes these guys to do what they do. And the one thing that was always in my mind is, what made you so rageful? Why did you, just go into becoming completely berserk and really overkilling this person? And usually what I've been told is that it's resistance. Okay, resistance. like I've been told by a couple serial killers who are in prison that it's resistance. When somebody resists, that would make them even more enraged. And of course, analyzing the resistance leads me to, well, resistance is another form of rejection, you know, and so, they can't deal with the rejection. So in their mind, even though it may not be in the front of their mind, but somewhere in their subconsciouses, by this person resisting, they won't allow them to have power and control, and they're rejecting them. So that infuriates them. And that's why there's more overkill on some victims and not on others. What do you say about that, Eddie?
There's truth there. Yeah, I would say, we know a lot of serial killers. They kind of get better at it generally. Uh, so they initially may, um, be a little sloppy, and they get more sophisticated, a little better at it. Um, I'm thinking anybody who's been in jail, I think Frank will back this up. It seems like the one thing they learn, above everything else, is that maybe next time I commit a crime, leave no witnesses. I'm going to make sure that I'm probably in jail now because I did leave a witness or two. So next time, I'm not going to do that. Um, um, so, their main motive may be, the power, the control, some sex. Um, an interesting fact that maybe audience may want to know is that most rapists, from my understand, they ejaculate before they even commit the crime or right before. So they, like Frank mentioned about the impotence, they're really not able to perform. So that could also trigger some anger. That's been dormant maybe until that episode occurs. Um, but um, I guess for this resistance, if you're talking resistance, yeah, that could anger somebody. Especially you look into their past. Ted Bundy said he killed, the same woman 100 times, or 100 different women, because he was rejected by his first girlfriend, right? So we don't believe much of what he said. He's probably pretty complex motives there, but he at least said, I believe, that he, killed his girlfriend, 100 different times, and maybe you get into some other issues too with these cases. But yeah, no one likes to be rejected or resisted, and that could certainly bring out more anger and vengeance. And but I would think, as I said before, when um, these people probably have a pretty good idea of how it's going to turn out. If it's going to be, you're going to let the victim go, just do a sexual assault and leave, or if they're going to, it's going to result in a murder.
Frank, what do you say about that?
Well, I think an organized serial killer doesn't want to get caught. I think that's the bottom line. And the anger may have come from Libby trying to get away, or Libby fighting him. She's trying to be brave, and he's not going to let her do that. And so he overkills. And I think that's what happened in this case.
Yeah, and Libby was known for, being a pretty tough girl. She was athletic. She had a lot going for her. She was very, very smart. She would have protected Abby, who was her smaller best friend. There's no question about it. Everybody says that she would have not deserted Abby, even if she could have gotten away. And I truly believe, she put up a very good and very brave fight. And ultimately, Libby is going to be the one that's going to catch this guy. And that's going to be really one for the books. She's gonna bring this guy down through the video she did. It's only a matter of time. Technology's getting better all the time too. I mean, eventually, somebody's going to clean that video completely up, and everybody's going to have a really good look. Let's hold there and get back to how sophisticated this killer was in another direction. Just getting back before we get into how sophisticated this killer was, just getting back into, what you talked about, Doctor. You mentioned, Ted Bundy, and how Ted Bundy seemed or said he was killing his ex-girlfriend who resisted and rejected him and who dumped him. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense as well. And as Frank brought up before about the fantasy and everything, because these guys, as we know, they fantasize a specific female in their minds, a specific body type, certain physical features. This is what they fantasize, okay? Beauty's in the eyes of the beholder, right? So this is what they're fantasizing and looking at. So that could be a reason too why they decided to pick on Libby and go after Libby more in a sexual way if it in fact happened versus Abby. Just like Ted Bundy focused on physical features, this fellow here, whoever he may be, could be focused on physical features and extremely angry at some woman who hurt him or scorned him in some way. So that's always a possibility too. And of course, again, somebody familiar with that area. I think we don't have to talk anymore on that. I mean, we've got that pinned down. This person is very familiar with that area. Also, when we talk about the sophistication, we keep going back and forth. Is he younger? Is he older? Is he younger? Is he older? Is this his first time out? And he's such a moron that he tried to take on two girls at one time. What the wind up was, whether they got away or tried to get away, or whatever happened in their trek from the bridge to the other side of the creek. He ended up killing them. Neither one of them are going to be a witness against them. The only witness is, God bless Libby, Libby's video. Okay. So even if it was his first time out, and even if he was stupid for trying to do this, did he pull it off? I mean, did he have luck on his side? I think he did. And neither one of the girls are going to be a witness against him. He did kill them. And he's gotten away with it. It's 3 years he's gotten away with it, right? So, is he a younger person? This was his first time out and he just got lucky. Or is he an older person who's much more sophisticated, definitely knew what he was doing, had it planned out in his mind how he was going to control them, was very confident he could control them. He could take them and manipulate them any way he wanted, and get them where he wanted to get them, and then, do what he wanted to do to them and eventually kill them. So that's something we've been going back and forth with, and, not to beat a horse to death, but I mean, this is a big question with this case, and you know, is he younger? Is he older? Because the FBI is saying 18 to 40 in their profile. However, our audience and the majority of our audience is saying, hey, that's an older guy. It's not a younger guy. Now, we got some people saying he's younger, but our audience, it's really focusing in on the video, on Libby's video, saying, now that's an older guy. It's got to be an older guy. What do you think, Frank? Let me start with you.
Well, I believe that the killer was between 25 and 35. I think that this probably wasn't his first crime. It seems too sophisticated for a first crime. But then the question is, who else did he kill? And we don't have an answer to that. So if it was his first crime, then I look and I think of the crime scene and the description that it was a kind of an outlier. It was in many ways a messy crime scene. And that might indicate that he wasn't as organized as I tend to believe. So I doubt that he's much older. I think controlling the two girls would have been very difficult for an older person. That's not to say that there aren't people out there that probably could handle that kind of situation, but I think in most cases that's not the case.
Okay. Eddie, what say you? Dr. Eddie?
Well, if he's I would say he's certainly not disorganized. He's probably, organized. The only, I guess, big mistake he made was he left the phone there, right? Didn't they find the phone? I guess Libby's phone. So that's a big mistake. I mean, imagine if he picked that up and took that, and then we would have no video and far less evidence. But I guess he either got, like I said, possibly got scared, or just got a little sloppy toward the end. I would agree with Frank that this is not his first time doing this. He probably has escalated over the years. When you say age, like older, younger, how do you define older or younger? I don't think he's 18. That would be unlikely. Yeah, I would agree with Frank. He's probably, more at 25 to 35. I think one issue that we brought up in our private conversations was his gait, the way he's walking. That could be a significant clue. I said, well, as we talked about privately, I would like that video to be seen by a specialist in physical medicine. It's called a physiatrist. It's not a psychiatrist, it's a physiatrist, but they're the experts in physical medicine. And even, I would even go with a physical therapist. For them to take a good, strong look at that video and to come up with a possible diagnosis. Is it a knee injury? Is it a hip injury? Is it something that's maybe chronic? Is it something that is maybe more acute? You could extrapolate from there. Maybe someone had. Is this post-surgical? Did he have some kind of surgery? And then he's still kind of hobbling because he has a distinct gait. And I don't know if that's been focused on sufficiently. So I'd like to get that addressed a little bit. I think that could lead to something. Then you look at, are there any hospitals in the area that did knee surgery, hip surgery, to a 25 to 35-year-old man? Could crimes have been solved by doing some investigation like that. So it's worth a shot.
I totally agree with you, and hopefully they're listening to us, and they're going to consult a physiatrist. Is that it? A physiatrist, right?
Right,
Not
desire, yeah,
physiatrist,
right.
and I'm sure they have one. That they can find up in Indiana. I mean, they're pretty much all over these days.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and that and we can say between 25 and 35, but remember this happened 3 years ago. So we could even say the person could be closer to 40. It's certainly not impossible, but when we like to stay in that parameter, of 25 to 35 when the murders took place. Um, and it's probably the ballpark. Let's hold it right there, and then we'll wind it up. Yeah. So to wind it up, I'd like to just send a message out there to the killer. I mean, my feelings on the killer is either he's on the grid, in which case he would be familiar with the information that's coming out there on him on the internet, and he'd be internet savvy. He'd be able to follow it, and if he is following it, which I believe he is, he's following us. um, if he's off the grid, then he's some guy living out in the woods or something someplace, which I don't think he is. And certainly the internet or YouTube is not even a thought in his mind or is even important to him. But what I would like the killer to know is that, and you guys know, we've gotten hundreds of tips, literally hundreds of tips. Now, if he goes and checks our comments, which I'm sure he checks everybody's comments, he's not going to see those tips. Okay. And the reason he won't see those tips is because we send those tips over to law enforcement. Law enforcement has all those tips, and there's a lot of tips. Okay. This guy, unless he's a hermit living out of a cave or living in a cardboard box in the woods or something around a train, this guy is in those tips. He's in there. Okay. I truly believe this. We understand sexual predators. We understand multiple killers who kill multiple people. They usually don't, especially sexual predators, they get an urge and they act on it. We know there hasn't been any murders locally. I believe that law enforcement has at least touched this guy, maybe interviewed him, maybe asked questions about him, maybe came across him. But what I want him to know is that for those two girls, we're not going to stop. And we're going to continue to brainstorm on him. And we're going to continue to send the tips over to him. And as law enforcement starts to sift through those tips, if they're not on him already, they will be on him. And he's going to have a date with destiny. Of course, can make things a lot better if he wants to turn himself in. What do you think about him turning himself in, Dr. Eddie?
Well, again, it's always a possibility. Pretty rare, especially if he still, has fantasies of doing this again. He gets these obviously, fantasies are exciting and you want to fulfill fantasies and recreate new images, new fantasies. Um, it, it does happen. So Frank may be more familiar with that. People walk into a police department and say, I want to confess. Um, People make guilty conscience or something happens, or if they sense maybe law enforcement's closing in on them, they may come in and save the trouble, continuing the investigation. But I don't know what the exact percent. I would say it's pretty rare, though, that they come in voluntarily.
It's very, very rare. And the urge is something that they're usually compelled to carry out. I mean, that urge from the people I've interviewed, they say is just so overwhelming. Um, and where's he been for the last 3 years is my question. Frank, what do you say about this guy turning himself in?
I doubt that that he will turn himself in. It's always possible, like the doctor said. And I read a book some time ago called The Compulsion to Confess by Theodore Reich. And so, it's possible that at some point he may, in some way, um, indicate that he did these murders, but um, I remain somewhat doubtful.
Yeah, and I'm doubtful. I'm right with you guys. I'm very doubtful, but I also know it's the only shot he has at all of trying to negotiate some kind of situation, um, and it could be mitigating circumstances to stop him from killing another girl, from killing again. I would like him to think about those urges, and he needs to have power and control over those urges and do something about it and turn himself in, and maybe there can be a mitigating circumstance, and he's not going to end up being executed. But if he doesn't turn himself in, it's I up in Indiana with this type of case, it's going to be real rough because he has the whole community in fear. The whole community is in fear. So why don't you do something for the community, and then maybe they'll show some lenience towards you, right? Well, anyway, I want to thank you guys. Thank you so much. I want to thank our audience. You're fantastic. Thank you so much for all your subscriptions. Thank you so much for watching us. Thank you so much for your comments. Most importantly, please take care of yourselves. You got to stay safe out there, and have a great day. And again, thank you so much.